Hi everybody, welcome back to engVid.com. I'm Adam. In today's video, we're going to look at the prepositions by and until. We're going to look at the differences between them and how to use them and what specific meanings they each have. We're also going to look at the expression by the time as another way of using by or whatever situation. And this one, no blank then. Now the reason I left this blank is because you can actually put quite a few words in there. We're going to look specifically at no later than to replace by or until, but for now, I want you to also understand that there's other uses for it, and I'll give you some examples of those. Now, before I start, I will say Emma did a very good lesson about by and until. Mine is a little bit different because I'm going to show you some other situations where you will use one or the other, okay? So we're going to start by figuring out what's the difference between these two. So look at our sample sentences. I'll get to our little time map in a second. I'll be at the office until noon. I'll be at the office by noon. Now, first of all, let's assume the average workday is from 9 till about 5 o'clock. But I have some meetings in the afternoon, so I will have to leave the office. But if you want to meet with me, I'll be there until noon. What does that mean? It means that I will arrive at the office at the usual time, 9 o'clock, and I will stay there. So my stay at the office will continue until noon. At noon, I will leave. Okay, so this is when we're using until. Now, before I get into that again, let's look at the second one. I'll be at the office by noon. So here, we're looking at somewhere in this time, but not later than noon, I will arrive at the office. Okay, now what's the key difference between these two? Well, one, something continues. An action starts, continues, and it ends at that time mentioned after until. So both of them have an end time. You could even say a deadline, but that's for other uses. There's an end time. And that end time is noon. Okay, something will happen at noon. Now, in the case of by, it could happen before. In the case of until, only one thing will happen. But the key to remember, when we use by, we're looking at a finite action. This arrive is a one-time thing, right? It could happen here. It could happen here. It could even happen here. With until, only here will I leave. Okay? Now, what's the difference? Another difference that we have to think about is not only the continuance of an action and the finite situation of an action. Here, we're looking at something ending. My time at the office will end. Here, something can end or start. So if you want to meet me, I'll be in the office by noon, so you can meet me from noon until 5. So the earliest time you can meet me is noon. The latest time you can meet me is just before noon because I'm leaving at noon, right? So that's one thing to keep in mind, basically the implied situation. Now, I'll be at the office by noon and I'll stay until 5. You can use both of them in one sentence. Sometime in here I'll arrive, and then from 12 till 5, I'll be at the office. So, what's the key? Now, I hope you basically notice this. What's the key difference in these two sentences? Is it the preposition? Yes, different prepositions, different meanings. But what I hope you realize is that the difference is in the verb be. Why? What does be mean here? What does be mean here? Be, I'll be at the office until till noon means I will stay at the office until noon. So this situation will continue. Here, be means arrive. I will arrive at the office by noon. So one point here in this time frame, I guess you could call it, something will happen. Continued, finite. Finite means it's a one-time action and that's it, it's finished. So that's a very important thing to remember with by. okay? By, and we also think about at, on, or before. So at for time, this is a little review of prepositions. At 5 o'clock on Friday, on day. So at 5 o'clock or before, at noon or before, on Friday or before, okay? Until, now we don't use this preposition to, but something continues to the end time, okay? So that's one way, another way of thinking about these two in terms of what's the difference. By or before, continue to, okay? We're going to look at a few more samples and you'll get a better idea of when to use by, when to use until. Okay, so let's look at some more examples, and I want to come back to this idea of finite actions, okay? Finish is a finite action. Now, just to clarify again, what does finite mean? It means it's a very limited time. It doesn't go on for a long time. So if you're going to finish your homework, means last question answered, done, finished. You can't be finishing for a long time because the verb finish doesn't extend. It's done or it's not done, right? So I'll finish my homework until 5. Now, a lot of people will say this, they will write this, but technically it's not correct. I'll finish my homework by 5 is okay because it's a one-time situation and it'll happen at 5 or before at some point in that time. So how would you fix the first sentence? 2 ways. One, I'll finish my homework at 5. That's one way. If you know you're going to be done at 5, you can say that. But the better thing to do is to change the verb. Make it a non-finite verb. I'll work on my homework until 5. Means work, 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 time goes on, work, 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 time goes on, 5 o'clock, okay, I'm done. Finished, not important. If you finished, great. If you didn't finish, that's fine. 5 o'clock is your end time, and you will finish later if you didn't finish by 5. Okay, now, another thing to keep in mind, we can use both prepositions with any tense. You can talk about the past, you can talk about the future, but when we're using perfect tenses, we use the by preposition. Let's look at examples. I'll have completed my tasks by 5 o'clock. Will have completed. This is your future perfect. The future perfect often makes use of by, okay? We can also talk about the past perfect. Now here I'm starting to introduce by the time. By the time has the exact same use or the exact same function as by, except that now, instead of saying by 5 o'clock, by Tuesday, by next year, I'm giving you a more general time, and then I'm identifying that time, right? So I could be more general. I could say anything. By the time we're through, I don't have to give you a specific time. I can give you a specific situation. By the time he arrived, so now the time is when this action happened. What time of the day? I don't know, not important. By the time he arrived, so I have my adjective clause to identify the time. And then I have my next clause, she had already left. So because at this time he arrived, by this time means at this time or before, right? So if it happened before, I must use the past perfect to show the relationship in time, okay? By the time he arrived, she had already left. I'll have completed my tasks by 5 o'clock. So 5 o'clock, they're done. Okay. Let's look at until, just to show you that could be past or present, future, etc. She waited in the lobby until he arrived. So she waited. Oh, there he is. So again, you don't have to use a specific time. You can use an actual clause, and then this is therefore a clause marker, an adverb clause marker, subordinate clause. Until he arrives, she can, this is an N, she can wait in the lobby. Until he arrives, she can. So we have a present. Until he arrives, keep in mind, when this is still an adverb clause now we're looking at. You can't use by as a clause marker, as an adverb clause, but you can use by the time with an adjective clause, or until with an adverb clause. Until he arrives, she will wait in the lobby. present simple, future. And again, think about when. When he arrives, she will have been waiting in the thing for 5 hours. You can also use the perfect with until, but then you have to specify the time period. When you're using perfect, go with the by, more common. Use until as an adverb clause conjunction. That's another big difference between these two. By, always a preposition. Until can be a preposition or a conjunction for an adverb clause. So that's important to understand as well. So now we're going to look at expressions that we can use to replace these in case we're ever not sure. Okay? Okay, so let's do a little bit of review before we look at some other expressions. Before I want to do anything else, actually, I want to mention until. You might notice in many situations people using the word till, or sometimes they'll use like an abbreviation, apostrophe till. Till is a little bit more common. Till with an apostrophe is a bit more common in American English. Personally, there's only one letter difference, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Just write until. If you're not sure, use until in your writing. In spoken English, till, both okay. In written English, go with until. Now, let's review this. By the time, we use by the time plus an adjective clause to identify which time. So we can have two options. I can say by the end of the lesson, like let's say we're having a lesson now. So by the end of this lesson, you will have learned about by until. Or by the time, which time, that we are done, you will have learned about by and until. So there are two ways to use by. Just the thing to remember is when you use by the time, make sure to identify which time. If you have a specific time, end of the lesson means this particular time when the lesson is finished, and then go on with your next clause saying what will have happened then or before. Maybe you already understand by and until, in which case, good stuff. Now, another thing I want to look at. I'll be done by 7. I'll be done no later than 7. What's the difference in these two meanings? Nothing. We can use no later than as a replacement for by. Now, why am I showing you this? If you're ever in a situation where you're writing and you're not exactly sure if you should use by or until, and you don't want to make a mistake, maybe on a test or whatever the situation, here's another option. No later than means this is the absolute latest time. So this time or before. It basically means the same thing as by. Okay? And again, I'm still using a finite verb in this case. When are you working until? So I'm asking you, when are you ending your work? 7 at the latest. This is another expression, but be careful with it because some people say, oh, I'm working until 7 at the latest. Until 7 means 7 is the latest. So at the latest becomes redundant. If you're going to use this expression, don't use until. If you're going to use until, don't use this added expression. And I'll be there. Now, we can go the opposite way. We can talk about earlier, no earlier than. So no later than means end time. No earlier than means beginning time. Do you remember that graph we looked at before when I said by could be an end or a start? Well, that's where we have this. The key to remember is that when we turn it around to use by or until, then we're going to basically go with the opposite verb, like negative or positive. I'll be there no earlier than noon. I won't be there by noon. I won't be there until noon. So by noon means noon or before, I won't show up. I won't be there until noon. At noon, I will arrive and continue. Okay? So the won't be will continue until noon. The won't be will continue, will be from noon or before. And again, different meaning to the verb be, but you can use no earlier than, no later than. You can also use these. These are basically minimizers and maximizers, this expression. No later than, maximum. No earlier than, minimum, in terms of time. You can use other expressions. You can use no sooner than, basically means the same as earlier. You can say no more than, means a maximum amount or a maximum number. No less than or no fewer than means a minimum. So these are good to have for time, but just so you understand, they're applicable to basically everything: numbers, quantities, time, situations, etc. So I hope that all of this helped you understand how to use by, until, by the time, and no later than. I hope you enjoyed this lesson. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel if you did. If you have any questions, please go to engVid.com, join the forum and ask me the questions you have. I'll be happy to try to answer them. There's also a quiz at engVid.com. Take the quiz, make sure you understand which one of these expressions to use based on the context. And of course, come back again soon. See us again. We'll have more great lessons for you, and I'll see you then.